police officer's job is particularly dangerous when doing traffic enforcement or assisting stranded motorists. Hundreds of police officers have been injured, even killed, when struck by inattentive, drunk, or drowsy motorists who fail to use care. In 2009, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts enacted the Move Over Law, which requires motorists upon approaching emergency vehicles or work crews in their vehicles at the side of the road to move over to the next lane, or if there is no other travel lane, to slow to a safe speed when passing. Recently, Sergeant Mike Benedetti took NPA TV along as we prepared this next segment.
Basically, the what's known as the Move Over Law it's Mass General Laws 89, 7C, and that law was put into effect back in 2009. And what it basically tells motorists to do is, when they approach a stationary emergency vehicle, whether it be a police cruiser, a ambulance, a piece of fire apparatus, or any type of designated DPW work crew along the side of the road, what they need to do is move to the next lane over, and if that's safe to do so, and if it isn't, they at least need to slow down to a diminished speed where it's safe. So for our purposes, we're really dealing with police cruisers that have vehicles stopped along the side of the road, and when a motorist comes up upon him, the law really, it's fairly clear that you need to do is move into, if you're especially like a Route 1 or divided highway, move one more lane over to give a free lane next to the officer. Or if you can't safely move over due to traffic, you need to slow down and proceed very cautiously by that stop. Motor vehicle stops are a pretty dangerous activity for police officers to conduct. There's many officers who are killed every year struck by vehicles. We've had several cruisers in Norwood struck while on motor vehicle stops. Fortunately, none of our officers have been injured, but we've had some very close calls, and that's really what I want to avoid. So basically, Officer Riley, who's driving 661 ahead of us, will be making a motor vehicle stop, and we'll take a look and see on Route 1 if motorists are going to yield and move over as they should. So the law's been in effect for quite a while now, so it's pretty widely known by the public. For the first couple of months when it went into effect, mostly was education. We were issuing a lot of warnings and really trying to educate drivers about it. There's a lot of publicity through pamphlets and general public service announcements teaching people about it. So now we're a few years into the law, and it should be fairly widely known. You can see the first thing the officer has done is he's actually offset his cruiser into the travel lane a little bit. That gives him a little bit of a safety margin when he steps out of his car and approaches the violator vehicle. He's not actually standing into traffic. He's got basically a quarter or a half of his cruiser that's blocking him. So if he does get hit from behind, hopefully the cruiser will take most of the impact as opposed to him. Now, motorists coming up on this cruiser, they should either be moving completely out of the lane to the right, to the left-hand lane, or they should, if they can't get out of the lane, they should be slowing way down. And if you look really closely at the front wheels of that cruiser, they're angled out. So if that cruiser is struck from behind, it'll push the cruiser out into traffic as opposed to into the violator's car. So we've got pretty much everyone fairly compliant here with the Move Over Law.
On a misty Saturday morning last fall, we traveled to the town of Medfield, where, at the intersection of Clay Pit Road and Causeway Street, a civic square was dedicated to Medfield police officer and Norwood native Robert Naughton. Known to everyone as Bob, he served the town of Medfield with honor and distinction, and with valor in his adopted town. Nonetheless, we in Norwood unashamedly lay claim to Bobby Naughton. He grew up here on Howard Street, the loving son from a wonderful Norwood family. He was schooled here, and he developed into the young man that would settle in Medfield and join the police department. A more conscientious or more dedicated police officer would be difficult to find. He was appointed in 1970, promoted to detective in 1988, and by 1990 he was representing the town of Medfield as the prosecutor for their department in the Dedham courts. He was always ready, especially in the courts, to help anyone. Police officers, new prosecutors, attorneys, victims, and witnesses navigate the labyrinth of this court system. When not in court, Bobby could be found making the most of his time and energy. he would be where he thought he could do the most good. Such was the case with a day in 1991 when Bob took his lunch with him for a ride. He had made it a habit to follow the armored cars which entered Medfield when they came into town, as they made their pickups and deliveries, and then when they left. When the armored car got to the bank in the heart of Medfield Center, two masked gunmen approached the car while the handler was outside of the truck. Detective Norton rushed at the gunmen with his gun drawn and ordered them to drop their weapons. When they failed to do so, Detective Norton fired 3 rounds at them. They dropped their guns. Bob took both into custody. For his act, Bob was awarded the Commonwealth's highest award, the George Hanna Medal of Honor. Bob was an avid outdoorsman and died suddenly in 2002 while enjoying the outdoors. There is no better evidence that he was such an unforgettable friend and public servant that 10 years after his passing, the town of Medfield turned out in such numbers to honor his memory.
In the month of February, the Norwood Police Department conducted in-house training for all sworn members of the department. Now, there's a state agency called the Municipal Police Training Committee. Over the years, the MPTC has provided in-service training programs of 40 hours for veteran officers. However, over the last few years, the amount of training provided by the state has diminished as a result of chronic underfunding of that agency. As a result, the responsibility for training police officers is shifting from the state to each city and town police department. For instance, in the past, Norwood police officers attended a full week of in-service training, a 40-hour program. This year, the state is only providing 12 of the required 32 hours of training. The Norwood Police Department has picked up the difference, and we are conducting in-house training. In our first episode of Norwood P.D. Blue, we showed you a little bit about the simunitions training being conducted at the landfill on Winter Street. That training, if you remember, combined marksmanship with decision-making training. It featured the use of marker cartridges fired by police officers in realistic training scenarios, and the training was designed to combine marksmanship and decision-making. This month's in-house training is broken into 3 segments. The first segment was provided by Officer Chris Flanagan of the Norwood Police Department. Officer Flanagan was a combat medic in the U.S. military and has training in the treatment of combat wounds. Officer Flanagan's presentation was on critical wound care, and he instructed police officers to how to treat themselves as well as how to treat crime victims who have suffered critical wounds. His classroom presentation wrapped up with hands-on training, where officers had to apply bandages, tourniquets, and other types of dressings to each other. The second segment was conducted by Chief Brooks. We took a look at some of the tactical issues that officers have to keep in mind when they are involved in enforcement activity while out of uniform. Most people outside law enforcement probably don't give this issue much thought. But when police officers engage in enforcement activity and they are not wearing an identifiable uniform, they are at some risk. In fact, once or twice throughout the year, somewhere in the United States, a police officer is shot and killed by other law enforcement officers in shootings called friendly fire. Because the department has expanded its use of anti-crime units, and because officers will occasionally take enforcement action while off-duty and out of uniform, it was imperative that the department provide training to officers on the perils of taking enforcement action when not in uniform. This segment on friendly fire was conducted in the classroom at the Norwood Police Department. A third segment of training was conducted by the Massachusetts State Police. Lieutenant Robert Soichka instructed Norwood police officers in the use of a program called CopLink. CopLink is software that combines the record management system at the Norwood Police Department with the record management systems of other law enforcement agencies in Massachusetts. It allows us to query subjects who might not have been charged with a crime but have come to the attention of police. We thank the Massachusetts State Police for providing this training to Norwood police officers.
36 years ago, in February of 1977, Jimmy Carter had just been inaugurated as President of the United States. That same month, Rocky was awarded Best Picture at the 49th Academy Awards. And in Norwood, 5 patrolmen were appointed to the Norwood Police Department. 2 of them are still working. So if you happen to see Officer Robert Baker or Sergeant Elaine Kugis, congratulate them on having just completed 36 years with the Norwood Police Department.
My name is Officer Jeffrey Baguma, Norwood Police Department. Been on the department for 7 years. I was born in Kampala, Uganda. In Uganda I believe was the first place that I came across a police officer. And that police officer was my grandfather, Jeffrey. His position was officer in charge of investigations. He was in charge of the detective division. After Uganda, I moved to Sweden. In Sweden, I went to school. I learned the language, experienced the new culture. And after Sweden, I moved to Virginia, and not too long after, I moved to Norwood, Massachusetts. While in Norwood, I was introduced to an officer by the name of Richard Giacopo, who's now Detective Giacopo. And I was fortunate enough to be able to speak to him on many occasions about why he became a police officer, what led him in that path, and so on. And speaking to him, I'd have to say, helped me go towards my goal even more. I've been on the Norwood Police Department for about 7 years now. In those 7 years, I've been fortunate enough to join 3 different programs. The first one is the EAP, the Employee Assistance Program. I joined that program because no matter what job you have, I think it's important to always be ready to take care of any employees if they're experiencing any problems, whether it be work-related or family-related. I think it's very important to take care of the people who are especially taking care of the town. The second program that I'm involved in is the Child Seat Restraint Program. And what that entails is a family member or any person who's interested in the safety of a child and who's going to be transporting them in a motor vehicle can call the department, contact the department, and set up a time and date to have a certified child seat technician come out and make sure that the seat they bring or the seat that's in their vehicle is properly installed. I think it's very important because what you're doing is you're taking care of most people's most precious cargo, which is their children. The third program that I'm involved in is the Norwood Police Honor Guard. The Norwood Police Honor Guard is the ceremonial arm of the Norwood Police Department. The Norwood Police Honor Guard is a unit of professional and very dedicated police officers. And what we do is we volunteer to march in ceremonies that the community puts together. And while we're marching, we're not only representing the Norwood Police Department, but we're representing the town of Norwood in a whole. And I think it's very important to be able to show that to the community that you work for and you work in, that you're proud enough to march for them and you want to be part of those ceremonies.
Hello, I'm Lieutenant Brian Murphy. This month's Norwood P.D. Blue in the Rear View History segment recalls a harrowing night in the department's history. It is somewhat recent history, just from the year 2000, but it is now firm in the history and memory of the Norwood Police Department. A sergeant accompanies his men on what should be a simple call. On August 23rd, at about 4 o'clock in the morning, the station received a complaint of a loud stereo coming from a home on Woodland Avenue. Sergeant Cady immediately recognized the address as that of a man who had been arrested just days earlier when an officer went to that home to make a notification for a neighboring police department. Arriving at the scene of the disturbance, Sergeant Cady approached the home with Officer John Gover. He rang the doorbell, and upon an inquiry from someone inside, he announced his office and his purpose. After a brief delay during which Sergeant Cady detected considerable movement inside, the front door opened. Appearing at the door was 24-year-old Joshua Kirby, son of the homeowner, the same person arrested for assault and battery on a police officer just days earlier. Sergeant Cady spoke to the young man through the glass of the storm door. He told him that the station received a complaint from a neighbor and that he would have to turn down the volume on his stereo. The man told Sergeant Cady that he would turn down the music, and he turned towards the interior of the house. Suddenly, the man spun back around and threw a blow through the glass of the door, striking Sergeant Cady in the chest. Sergeant Cady did not realize that he had just been stabbed. The assailant dropped his knife and retreated into the house. Sergeant Cady and Officer Gover pursued the suspect through the house, out a side door. Sergeant Cady and Officer Bill Kelleher pursued the man on foot, while Officer Gover returned to his cruiser. He headed off the suspect some 500 feet up the street. There, Sergeant Cady, Officer Gover, and Officer Kelleher captured him. He resisted arrest and had to be wrestled to the ground. Even still, the arresting officers had to deploy OC spray before the suspect ceased resisting. Once the situation was under control, the prisoner in custody, and the safety of his men and the prisoner ensured, Sergeant Cady's attention turned towards himself for the first time. He felt short of breath. He felt a searing pain in his chest. Examining his shirt, he found it was covered with blood, his own. Sergeant Cady had been stabbed once, just to the left of the center of his chest. The wound was from a Swiss Army knife, was 3/4 of an inch wide and 1.5 inches deep. Officers Gover and Kelleher and Officer Neil Murphy began to treat his wound. The Norwood Fire Department, ambulance, and paramedics from the Caritas Norwood Hospital responded to the scene and determined that the grievous nature of the injury wanted Sergeant Cady's immediate transport to the Boston Medical Center via Boston Med Flight. As Kirby's mother was not yet accounted for, the officers at the scene were directed to enter the house to check on the welfare of Kirby's mother and any others found inside. Mrs. Kirby, as investigators later learned, had left the home just a short time earlier when her son started playing music loudly. Officers did find a bloody Swiss Army knife on the floor in the hallway within the house. A Superior Court judge later ruled that the police were not justified to enter the house, nor were they justified to seize the knife once discovered. Kirby was arraigned the next day and sent for psychiatric evaluation. Ultimately, he was convicted of assault and battery. Sentenced to 2 years, he was soon released for time served. He was to remain on probation until 2011. In 2001, Sergeant Cady, Officer John Gover, and Officer Bill Kelleher were honored at the State House during the annual Trooper George L. Hanna Awards. Sergeant Cady was singularly honored with the highest award for heroism in the Commonwealth, the Trooper George L. Hanna Medal of Honor.
Our final award this afternoon is the highest the Commonwealth bestows upon its police officers. I will now call forward our 2001 George L. Hanna Medal of Honor recipient. Please welcome from the Norwood Police Department, Sergeant James Cady. the Commonwealth of Massachusetts presents Sergeant James Cady, the George L. Hanna Medal of Honor.
Hi, this is Chief Bill Brooks of the Norwood Police Department, and welcome to Ask the Chief. This is the portion of our program where people can send us a question and it will be answered on the air. This month's question is, what is an anti-crime assignment? I keep seeing the term, well, assigned to anti-crime. What is it and how does it work? Well, an anti-crime unit is a unit with 1 or 2 patrol officers in it. Those officers are dressed in plain clothes, driving a nondescript vehicle, and they have essentially a dual mission: patrol and surveillance. They don't answer radio calls unless those calls are for ongoing suspicious activity. We give anti-crime units intelligence generated by the reports written by our officers, and then officers in the anti-crime units patrol and conduct surveillance in those so-called hotspots. Now, those might be areas where there have been house breaks into vehicles, or drug activity. And the mission of the officers is to go where the activity may be occurring, to be able to predict in time and place where the activity may take place, to be there when it occurs and to detect it. They've been very successful, and significant arrests have been made in the areas of house breaks, vehicle breaks, and drug activities. We're very happy with the work performed by the officers assigned to anti-crime, and we have high hopes for them in the future. If you have a question and you'd like it answered on the air during our Norwood PD Blue episode, you can email, call, or send us a line and ask us a question, and we'll be happy to answer it on the air. So for Norwood PD Blue and the Norwood Police Department, I'm Chief Bill Brooks. Thank you.